Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Rain drummed against the airplane window as Thomas Wren stared at the approaching Portland skyline. 18 months in Alaska's isolation had changed him. The classified green energy propulsion system had consumed his days and nights, but thoughts of home of Kellen had kept him going through the endless dark winters. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. Thomas gathered his worn duffel bag, nodded to the flight attendant, and stepped into the terminal. His movements were precise, economical habits from his military days that the recent government project had only reinforced. The drive home took 40 minutes. Thomas noted each familiar landmark with quiet satisfaction. The Barnes house with its blue shutters. The park where he'd taught Kellen to ride a bike. The corner market where they bought ice cream on summer evenings. Each sight loosened something in his chest. When he pulled into the driveway of the two-story colonial, Thomas sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel. The house looked different somehow. The flower beds Lorna had always kept immaculate were overgrown. The porch light was off. No welcoming glow from the living room windows. Thomas grabbed his bag and walked to the front door. His key turned in the lock, and he stepped inside. Silence greeted him. Thomas set his bag down, his boots squeaking against the hardwood floor. "Hello." His voice echoed against unfamiliar walls. The furniture had been rearranged. The family photos that once lined the entryway were gone, replaced by abstract prints in sleek black frames. A door slammed upstairs, followed by hurried footsteps. Kellen appeared at the top of the stairs, his face breaking into a grin that reminded Thomas of the boy at 5, at 8, at 12. "Dad!" Kellen bounded down the stairs and threw his arms around Thomas. The boy, young man now had grown at least 3 inches. His shoulders had broadened, his voice deepened. Thomas wrapped his arms around his son, inhaling the scent of him. "Hey, buddy." Kellen pulled back, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You didn't tell us you were coming today. Wanted to surprise you." Thomas glanced around the unfamiliar living room. "Where's your mom?" As if summoned, the front door opened. Lorna stepped in, balancing paper grocery bags in her arms. Her hair was different, shorter, blonder. Her yoga pants and fitted top looked expensive. She froze when she saw Thomas. Something flashed across her face, shock, then something else Thomas couldn't identify before she composed herself into a polite smile. "Thomas, you're back." She set the groceries on the hall table. "We weren't expecting you until next week. Project wrapped early." Thomas stepped forward, unsure whether to hug his wife or shake her hand. The distance between them felt insurmountable. "Thought I'd surprise you." Lorna nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Well, you certainly did that." She gestured vaguely at the living room. "As you can see, things are different now." "I noticed." Thomas looked at the sleek new furniture, the modern art, the absence of family photos. "Quite a change." "Well, the house is different now." Lorna picked up her groceries. "We're different now." She disappeared into the kitchen. Thomas glanced at Kellen, who was watching him with an intensity that seemed beyond his 15 years. "She redecorated a few months ago," Kellen said quietly. "Said she needed a fresh start." Thomas nodded, unsure what to say. He'd expected some adjustment after 18 months away, but not this emptiness. "Come on," Kellen said, grabbing Thomas's duffel. "I'll help you unpack. Your room's still upstairs." He paused. "Mom moved some stuff around, but your clothes are still there." "My room?" Thomas asked. Something cold settled in his stomach. Kellen wouldn't meet his eyes. "Yeah, Mom's been using the master bedroom. Said you wouldn't mind since you were gone so long." Thomas followed his son upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway was the same, but the photos that once lined at their wedding, Kellen's birth, family vacations were gone. In their place hung abstract prints and black and white landscapes. Kellen pushed open the door to the guest room. Thomas's clothes hung neatly in the closet, his books stacked on the nightstand, his life packed away in the spare room. "Dad," Kellen's voice was tight. "Are you okay?" Thomas set his jaw. "Fine." He placed a hand on Kellen's shoulder. "Just tired from the flight." That night, Thomas lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the house settle around him. The rain tapped against the window, a familiar Portland lullaby that had once comforted him. Now it only underscored how out of place he felt in his own home. Lorna hadn't joined them for dinner. She'd claimed a yoga class, then drinks with friends. When Thomas had asked which friends, she'd given him a look that suggested the question itself was inappropriate. "Things change, Thomas," she'd said, her voice carefully neutral. "You've been gone a long time." Now, in the darkness, Thomas cataloged those changes methodically. The missing photos, the rearranged furniture, the separate bedrooms, Lorna's coolness. Only Kellen felt the same. His son's fierce hug had been the one true homecoming. Thomas turned onto his side, staring into the darkness. He'd survived 18 months in Alaska's isolation. He could survive whatever this was. 3 days passed in uneasy silence. Thomas reacquainted himself with the house, running his hands over unfamiliar furniture, opening cabinets that had been reorganized in his absence. Each change felt deliberate, as if Lorna had methodically erased his presence. That on the fourth morning, Thomas woke early. He pulled on running shoes and slipped out into the dawnlight. The familiar route through the neighborhood brought a welcome sense of normalcy. Left at the Mortons' house, right at the park, past the elementary school where Kellen had once played tetherball at recess. When he returned, sweaty and clear-headed, Kellen sat at the kitchen table eating cereal. The boy glanced up, relief crossing his face. "Morning," Thomas said, grabbing a glass of water. "You're up early." Kellen shrugged. "School project. Wanted to get an early start." He hesitated. "Dad, is everything okay? With you and Mom?" Thomas leaned against the counter. "Just adjusting. It's been a while. She's been acting weird. Since before you came back." Kellen stirred his cereal without eating it. "She's gone a lot. Comes home late. We're keeping her busy." Kellen's mouth twisted. "She says that, but her studio closes at 8. She doesn't get home until midnight sometimes." He glanced toward the stairs. "She gets phone calls. Takes them outside or in her room." Something cold settled in Thomas's chest. "Kellen." "Thomas? You're back." Lorna appeared in the doorway, dressed in sleek workout clothes, her phone in hand. "I need the car today. I have clients back-to-back, then a marketing meeting for the studio." "I can drop you," Thomas offered. "Want to see the new location anyway." "No need." Lorna's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Jessa's picking me up. We're having breakfast first." Jessa. Thomas remembered her vaguely, a newly divorced friend of Lorna's with expensively highlighted hair and a tight smile. "I haven't seen Jessa in a while," Thomas said. "How is she?" "Fine." Lorna glanced at her phone. "She's got a new place downtown. Anyway, she'll be here in 10. Kellen, don't forget you have that dentist appointment after school. I've left money for an Uber on my dresser." "I can take him," Thomas said. Lorna paused. "You sure? You don't need to jump back in so quickly. We managed fine while you were gone." "I'm sure." Thomas met her gaze steadily. "I'm back now." Something flickered across Lorna's face. Annoyance? Fear? It was gone before Thomas could identify it. "Fine. Saves me the Uber fare." A car horn sounded outside. Lorna grabbed her purse and water bottle. "That's Jessa. I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up." She disappeared through the front door without a backward glance. Thomas turned to Kellen, who was watching him with that same intense gaze. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Thomas asked quietly. Kellen looked down at his cereal. "I don't know for sure, but you suspect." Kellen nodded, still not meeting his father's eyes. Thomas sat at the table across from his son. "Talk to me, buddy." "I think." Kellen stopped, then started again. "Mom's different since you left. At first, she was sad, and she started going out more. With Jessa, she said. Then she'd come home smelling like cologne." Thomas felt his jaw tighten, but kept his face neutral. "Anything else?" "She got new clothes. Started working out at new gym. The one downtown, the fancy smoothie bar. She's on her phone all the time, but she gets jumpy if I walk in while she's texting." Kellen finally looked up. "She redecorated right after Christmas. Said she needed a fresh start for the new year. She put all our old family photos in boxes in the garage." Thomas nodded, processing this information with the same methodical focus he'd apply to an engineering problem. "When did she move in the master bedroom?" "February. Said it was dumb to keep it empty while you were gone." Kellen's voice was flat. "She threw out your old recliner too." said it didn't match the new decor. The recliner where Thomas had rocked Kellen as a colicky baby, where he'd read bedtime stories, where he'd sat with a 5-year-old Kellen on his lap after the boys' first t-ball game, explaining that sometimes you struck out, but you kept stepping up to the plate anyway. Thomas pushed down the flare of anger. Has she said anything about me? About when I be home? Not really. Kellen hesitated. She doesn't talk about you much. When I ask, she says you're busy with your project, that it's important work. Thomas nodded. It was important work, sustainable energy research that could revolutionize shipping and transportation. But not more important than his family. Never that. Dad. Kellen's voice was quiet. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The directness of the question caught Thomas off guard. He studied his son, the tension in his shoulders, the careful blankness of his expression. Kellen was bracing for impact, preparing for bad news. I don't know, Thomas said honestly. But whatever happens, you and I are solid. You understand that. Kellen nodded, some of the tension leaving his body. Yeah, I know. That night, Thomas waited up for Lorna. The clock ticked past midnight, then 1. He sat in the living room in the dark, listening to the rain tap against the windows. A T-147. Headlights swept across the front of the house. A car door slammed. Thomas heard Lorna's key in the lock, then her voice quiet, laughing followed by a deeper murmur. Thomas tensed, but the second voice faded. A car started, then pulled away. Lorna entered alone, kicking off her shoes in the entryway. Jesus! She startled when she noticed Thomas sitting in the shadowed living room. What are you doing sitting in the dark? Waiting for you. Thomas kept his voice neutral. You said you'd be late. Didn't say how late. Lorna flipped on a lamp, bathing the room in soft light. She wore a dress Thomas hadn't seen before, her makeup heavier than usual. A faint scent of unfamiliar cologne hung around her. Well, here I am. She set her purse on the new glass coffee table, another change. You really didn't need to wait up. I told you. We've managed fine while you were gone. Managed what exactly? Thomas asked, watching her closely. Lorna stiffened. What does that mean? You tell me. Thomas leaned forward. Who dropped you off? Jessa. We had drinks after my meeting. The lie came smoothly, practiced. Jessa drives a Subaru. That was a Lexus. Lorna's eyes narrowed. Are you spying on me? I'm sitting in my own living room, Lorna. It's been my living room for 18 months, Thomas. Her voice sharpened. You can't just walk back in and start questioning me like I'm one of your military subordinates. Is that what I'm doing? Yes. You've been home 4 days, and you're already trying to control everything. Offering to drive me to work. Interrogating me about my schedule. Questioning who drops me off. She ran a hand through her hair. You're paranoid. You've been gone too long. We've changed. Thomas asked quietly. Or you, both. All of us. You can't just press pause on real life, Thomas. While you were playing with your secret government toys in Alaska, we were here, living. Things change. Thomas stood, keeping his face carefully neutral despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. Things like what, Lorna? Like our marriage vows? Like our family? Don't be dramatic. Lorna grabbed her purse. I'm tired. We can talk about this tomorrow. Is there someone else? Thomas asked directly. Lorna froze, then laughed a brittle sound with no humor in it. Seriously? That's what you jumped to? God, Thomas, this is exactly why things are strained between us. You're so cold, so suspicious. Everything's a problem to solve, a situation to analyze. She walked to the stairs, then turned back. I've spent 18 months building a life without you. Running my business, taking care of our son, making a home, and your first instinct is to accuse me of cheating. She shook her head. Maybe you should ask yourself why that's where your mind goes. She disappeared upstairs, leaving Thomas alone in the half-lit living room. He stood there for several minutes, analyzing her response. Not a denial, a deflection, an attack. Thomas had interrogated enough people in his military days to recognize evasion when he heard it. For the next week, life settled into an uneasy routine. Thomas reconnected with Kellen, driving him to school, attending his soccer practice, helping with homework. Lorna remained distant, leaving early, returning late, her excuses varying, but the pattern consistent. Thomas began documenting everything methodically. Times Lorna left. Times she returned. Excuses given. Inconsistencies noted. The engineer in him approached the problem systematically, gathering data before drawing conclusions. On the 10th day after his return, Thomas was fixing the garbage disposal. Another change. This one practical when Kellen appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face pale. "Dad, can I talk to you?" Thomas slid out from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sure. What's up?" Kellen glanced nervously over his shoulder, then back at Thomas. "I tried to tell you before, but I wasn't sure." He took a deep breath. "Mom's been." The front door opened, cutting him off. Lorna's voice called out, "Kellen, have you seen my laptop charger?" Kellen stepped back, his face closing off. Later, he whispered. That night, Thomas waited until Lorna was in the shower, then knocked softly on Kellen's door. The boy was at his desk, headphones on, typing furiously on his laptop. He jumped when Thomas touched his shoulder. "Sorry," Thomas said. "Didn't mean to startle you." Kellen pulled off his headphones. "It's fine. Just working on a coding project." Thomas nodded. Kellen had always been good with computers, building them, programming them, understanding them in a way that reminded Thomas of his own affinity for mechanical systems. "Earlier today," Thomas began, "you wanted to tell me something." Kellen's eyes flicked toward the hallway, checking for Lorna. "Yeah." He swallowed. "I'm not sure how to say this." "Directly is usually best," Thomas advised. Kellen nodded. "Mom's having an affair." The words landed like a punch, even though Thomas had suspected them. He kept his face neutral, waiting for Kellen to continue. "His name is Milo. He owns that new gym downtown, the one with the juice bar. Mom started going there last fall. By Christmas, they were." Kellen trailed off, his face reddening. "How do you know this?" Thomas asked quietly. "I heard her on the phone. Saw text when she left her phone unlocked. Then I followed her one day after school. She said she was meeting Jessa, but she went to his apartment." Kellen looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry, Dad. Not your fault." Thomas placed a hand on Kellen's shoulder. "None of this is on you. There's more." Kellen bit his lip. "Jessa knows. She's been covering for Mom. They talk about you sometimes. About what Mom's going to do when you get back. About the house. Money. Custody." Kellen looked up, his eyes hard beyond his years. "She's been planning something, Dad. I don't know what exactly, but it's not good." Thomas nodded, his mind already shifting into strategic mode, evaluating threats, identifying variables. "Thank you for telling me. I should have told you sooner." Kellen's voice was tight with suppressed emotion. "I just wasn't sure what I was supposed to do." "You did the right thing," Thomas assured him. "And now we'll figure this out together." The summons arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after Thomas's return. He was in the backyard, trimming branches from the maple tree that had grown unwieldy in his absence. When he heard the doorbell, by the time he made it to the front door, Lorna was signing for the envelope, her face a careful mask of surprise. "What's that?" Thomas asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. "How should I know?" "It's for you." She handed him the envelope without meeting his eyes, then headed upstairs. "I'm going to be late tonight. Studio marketing event." Thomas watched her go, then opened the envelope. The legal language was dense, but the meaning clear. Lorna was suing for full custody of Kellen and significant spousal support, claiming emotional abandonment during Thomas's absence. She was also attempting to claim half of his classified work bonuses money that was contractually tied to the project and his security clearance. Thomas read the document twice, his face betraying nothing. The military had taught him to control his expressions. The engineering work had refined that control into precision. Inside, anger churned, but outside, he remained perfectly still. He was still standing in the entryway, documents in hand, when Kellen came home from school. The boy took one look at the papers and his father's face and knew. "She did it," Kellen said flatly. It wasn't a question. Thomas nodded once. Kellen disappeared into his room, returning moments later with an old smartphone, not his current model, but an older one Thomas didn't recognize. "Dad." Kellen held out the phone. "Start with this." Thomas took the device. "What am I looking at?" "Password is your birthday. 6 digits. Kellen's eyes were hard. "I started recording them a month ago." "Mom and Jessa." Mom and Milo. All of it. Thomas stared at his son. Recording. The phone's microphone still works, even when the screen looks off. I wrote an app that triggers recording when it detects Mom's voice or Milo's. Kellen's expression was a mix of pride and shame. There's a lot on there. Kellen. Thomas's voice was gentle despite the anger building in his chest. Why did you do this? Because she was lying. To you. To me. Kellen's voice cracked. And I knew you'd need proof. Thomas placed a hand on his son's shoulder. This is a lot to carry alone. I'm not alone anymore. Kellen's chin lifted. You're back. That night, after Lorna left for her marketing event, Thomas sat on Kellen's bed, the old phone between them. You sure about this? Thomas asked. Once I listen, there's no going back. Kellen nodded. I'm sure. Thomas entered his birthday into the phone. The screen unlocked, revealing a simple app with dated recordings. He pressed the most recent one, dated yesterday. Lorna's voice filled the room. Already filed everything. Thomas doesn't suspect a thing. Another voice, female, sharp. What if the boy talks? Kellen? Please. He barely speaks to Thomas. Besides, what would he say? That his mommy has a life while daddy was playing soldier in Alaska. A laugh. Still, kids can be problems. Not my kid. Kellen knows which side his bread is buttered on. Once the court hears how emotionally damaged he made us, I'll get everything. Milo's already looking at places in Phoenix. This custody thing? Formality. And the money. The bonuses? Easy. I've already got the paperwork showing joint access to his accounts. Judge will split them straight down the middle. God, you're brilliant. The other voice, Jessa, laughed. Thomas won't know what hit him. He never does. Too busy with his precious systems and machines to notice actual people. 18 months without even visiting? That's abandonment, clear as day. The recording ended. Thomas sat perfectly still, his face a mask. Kellen watched him anxiously. Dad, are you okay? Thomas looked at his son, this boy who had grown into a young man while Thomas was away, who had carried this burden alone, who had chosen truth, however painful. We'll bury them with their own words, Thomas said, his voice cold and precise. Rain pattered against the window of the small coffee shop as Thomas waited, a manila folder on the table before him. He'd chosen this place carefully far from their neighborhood, away from Lorna's usual haunts. The barista placed a black coffee in front of him, and Thomas nodded his thanks. The bell above the door jangled. A woman entered, shaking rain from her umbrella. Her red hair was shorter than Thomas remembered, her face more lined, but her eyes sharp, assessing were unchanged. Rian Driscoll spotted him immediately and walked over, her expression guarded. She sat down without a greeting, studying him across the table. You look like hell, she finally said. Good to see you too, Ray, Thomas replied. Rian signaled the barista, ordered a latte, then turned back to Thomas. 3 years of silence, then a cryptic text asking to meet. Must be serious. It is. They sat in silence until the barista delivered Rian's drink. The awkwardness between them was old, worn smooth by years of distance. So, Rian took a sip of her latte. What's so important you're breaking our mutual silence pact? Thomas slid the manila folder across the table. Lorna's suing for full custody of Kellen, and half my project bonuses. Rian's eyebrows shot up. She opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. Emotional abandonment? That's rich. She looked up. You were on a government project, not a beach in Tahiti. She's been planning this for months. Since before I came home. Thomas kept his voice steady. She's having an affair with a gym owner named Milo Rourke. And you know this how? Rian was already reading the court documents with a professional eye. As a paralegal, she'd seen hundreds of divorce filings. Kellen told me. Thomas hesitated, and he has proof. He placed the old smartphone on the table. Rian looked at it, then at Thomas. What kind of proof? Recordings. Dozens of them. Lorna with her lover. Lorna with her friend Jessa, planning this whole thing. Thomas tapped the phone. Every word caught on tape. Rian's eyes widened. Your 15-year-old son bugged his mother. He wrote an app that triggers recording when it picks up certain voices. Despite everything, a hint of pride crept into Thomas's voice. Kid's always been good with tech. Jesus, Thomas. Rian ran a hand through her hair. That's a lot for a kid to deal with. I know. Thomas's jaw tightened. Believe me, I know. Rian picked up the phone, turning it over in her hands. This is a mess. You know that, right? Courts don't look kindly on recordings made without consent. Listen to them before you decide. Thomas leaned forward. She's manipulating the system, Ray. Using Kellen as a pawn. Trying to take everything I've built. And you want what? My legal advice? Rian set the phone down. Or my help? Both. Thomas met her gaze steadily. You're the best paralegal in Portland. And your family, whether we like it or not. Rian sighed, picking up the phone again. I'll listen. No promises after that. 20 minutes later, they sat in silence, the recordings finished. Rian's face had hardened with each snippet of conversation, Lorna and Milo laughing about Thomas's absence. Lorna and Jessa planning the custody strategy. Lorna coaching Milo on what to say if questioned. Okay, Rian finally said. I'm in. Just like that. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Just like that. Rian gathered the documents, sliding them back into the folder. I never liked her, you know. Even before. She trailed off. Before the fight that had separated them for 3 years. Before Thomas had chosen Lorna's side in an argument that had spiraled out of control. Before the silence. I know, Thomas said quietly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Rian stood, tucking the folder into her bag. This is going to get ugly. You need to prepare yourself and Kellen for that. I know. Do you have a lawyer yet? Thomas shook his head. Recommendations? Helena Chun at Barrett and Wong. She eats cases like this for breakfast. Rian hesitated. What about a place to stay? Lorna's going to explode when she realizes what you're doing. I'll figure something out. No, you won't. Rian rolled her eyes. You'll sleep in your car out of spite. Call Tilda. She always had a soft spot for you. Tilda Reese, their foster mother. Tough as nails, fair to a fault. The woman who'd taken in 2 traumatized children after their parents died and given them rules, structure, and a strange, gruff kind of love. Tilda's retired. Moved to that cabin outside the city. Exactly. Isolated, quiet, perfect place to regroup. Rian shrugged. Just a suggestion. Thomas nodded. I'll think about it. Do that. Rian turned to go, then paused. Hey, Thomas. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it. Thomas nodded once. Me too. That night, Thomas sat at Kellen's desk, headphones on, listening to recording after recording. His son lay on the bed, watching him with anxious eyes. Dad, Kellen finally asked, what are we going to do? Thomas removed the headphones. We're going to fight back. Methodically. How? Your recordings are a start. But we need more dates, times, inconsistencies in her stories. Thomas looked at his son. I need to ask you something important, Kellen. When the time comes, would you be willing to testify? To tell a judge what you've seen and heard? Kellen swallowed hard. Against Mom, for the truth, Thomas corrected gently. The boy was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes, I'll do it. Thomas reached out, squeezing his son's shoulder. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I'm not in the middle, Kellen said firmly. I'm on your side. Later, alone in the guest room that wasn't his, Thomas called a number he hadn't dialed in years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. It's midnight. This better be good. Tilda? It's Thomas. Thomas Wren. A pause. Well, I'll be damned. Hold on, let me put my teeth in. Despite everything, Thomas smiled. Tilda Reese hadn't worn dentures a day in her life. It was an old joke between them, her way of saying she needed a minute to compose herself. Okay, I'm seated. What's wrong? Why would something be wrong? Thomas asked. Boy, I raised you for 12 years. You don't call at midnight unless something's wrong. Thomas sighed. It's Lorna. She's suing for custody of Kellen. Full custody. The hell she is. Tilda's voice hardened. On what grounds? Emotional abandonment. Because of the Alaska project. That's horseshit, and any judge with half a brain will see it. Tilda paused. There's more, isn't there? She's having an affair. Has been for months. Been planning this whole thing, the lawsuit, taking half my project bonuses, everything. And you know this how? Kellen recorded them. Lorna and the guy. Lorna and her friend, planning it all. A low whistle. Smart kid. Takes after his dad. You shouldn't have had to do that, Tilda. Thomas's voice roughened. He's 15. He should be worried about soccer games and math tests, not bugging his mother's conversations. Life doesn't give us what we should have. It gives us what we get. Tilda's voice softened slightly. What do you need from me, Thomas? A place to stay. When this blows up, and it will, Kellen, and I will need somewhere to go. The cabin's yours as long as you need it. You know where the key is. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just do what needs doing. Tilda paused. And Thomas? Remember what I taught you. In a fight, the one who keeps their head wins. I remember. Good. Now get some sleep. You sound like death warmed over. The line went dead. Thomas set down the phone, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. One piece in place. The rest would follow. For the next 2 weeks, Thomas maintained a careful facade of normalcy. He went to job interviews, reconnected with former colleagues, helped Kellen with homework, all while methodically building his case. Each night, after Lorna left for her yoga classes or marketing events, Thomas and Kellen worked together. Thomas created spreadsheets tracking Lorna's inconsistencies. Kellen organized his recordings chronologically and by relevance, that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Thomas met with Rian at the same coffee shop, reviewing legal strategies, preparing documents, building their defense. We need to move carefully, Rian advised, spreading papers across the table. These recordings are powerful, but they're a nuclear option. Once we use them, there's no going back. I'm not looking to go back, Thomas replied. I'm looking to protect Kellen and what's rightfully mine. Fair enough. Rian tapped the document. Helena Chun has agreed to take your case. She thinks we have a strong position, especially with the recordings and Kellen's willingness to testify. Good. Thomas leaned back, running a hand over his face. The strain of the past weeks maintaining a neutral facade at home while preparing for battle was wearing on him. How are you holding up? Rian asked, her usual sharpness softening slightly. Fine. Thomas. Rian gave him a look. It's me. Cut the stoic bullshit. Thomas sighed. It's not me I'm worried about. It's Kellen. This is taking a toll on him. He's strong. Like his dad. Rian gathered the papers. And he's chosen his side. That's what worries me. He shouldn't have to choose sides at all. Lorna made that choice for him when she started lying. Rian's voice hardened. Some people don't deserve loyalty, Thomas. Not even from their children. Thomas thought of recordings he'd listened to Lorna's casual dismissal of Kellen's feelings, her use of him as a pawn in her legal strategy. Maybe not, but that doesn't make it easier for him. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Thomas spent the weekend finalizing preparations, his duffel bag already packed and hidden in the trunk of his car. When the storm broke, they would need to move quickly. Sunday night, as Thomas reviewed documents in the guest room, a soft knock sounded at his door. Kellen stood in the hallway, his face pale. Mom's on the phone with Jessa. They're talking about medical records. Thomas frowned. What medical records? I don't know. Something about proving you're emotionally unstable. Mom said she has it handled. Kellen's hands twisted together. Dad, what does that mean? A cold certainty settled in Thomas's stomach. It means she's going to lie. Again. The next morning, Thomas dressed with Care Navy suit, white shirt, conservative tie. Lorna watched him from the doorway of the guest room, her eyes suspicious. Where are you going? She asked. I thought your interview at Patterson Engineering wasn't until Wednesday. Meeting with a financial advisor, Thomas replied smoothly. Need to sort out some investment options now that the project's finished. Lorna nodded, seemingly satisfied. I'll be home late. Board meeting at the studio. Fine. Thomas straightened his tie. Kellen has a study group after school. He'll be home around 6. This was a lie. Kellen would be meeting Thomas at the courthouse at 4, as they had planned. The pieces were moving into place. Lorna left without another word. Thomas waited 10 minutes, then called Helena Chen's office to confirm the final details. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade impassive in the afternoon light. Thomas parked and checked his watch. 30 minutes until the hearing. Plenty of time. Inside, he found Helena Chun waiting in the lobby, a small, sharp-featured woman with assessing eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Mr. Wren. She extended a hand. We meet at last. Ms. Chun. Thomas shook her hand. Thank you for taking my case. Your sister is very persuasive. Helena led him to a quiet corner. And the evidence you provided is compelling. Those recordings are. Dad. Kellen hurried across the lobby, Rian beside him. The boy looked both nervous and determined in his school uniform button-down shirt, tie, khaki pants. Kellen. Thomas placed a hand on his son's shoulder. You ready for this? Kellen nodded, his jaw set in a way that reminded Thomas painfully of himself. Yes. Remember, Helena said quietly. In the courtroom, let me do the talking. Both of you, no matter what Lorna or her attorney says. We understand, Thomas replied. Kellen nodded his agreement. Helena checked her watch. It's time. As they walked toward the courtroom, Thomas caught sight of a familiar figure ahead, Lorna, standing with a slick-looking attorney in an expensive suit. Beside them stood Jessa, her highlighted hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Lorna's eyes widened when she saw Thomas. Then they shifted to Kellen, and her expression transformed from shock to fury. What is he doing here? She hissed as they approached. Kellen should be at study group. He's exactly where he needs to be, Thomas replied calmly. Lorna turned to Kellen. Go home. Now. This doesn't concern you. Actually, it does. Helena Chin stepped forward. Kellen is a material witness in these proceedings. Witness? Lorna's voice rose. What are you talking about? This is a simple custody hearing. Nothing about this is simple, Mrs. Wren, Helena replied. And nothing about your actions has been straightforward. Before Lorna could respond, the bailiff called their case. Thomas placed a protective hand on Kellen's shoulder as they entered the courtroom. Judge Noland Avery presided, a stern-faced man with silver hair and assessing eyes. He reviewed the documents before him with methodical focus, then looked up at the assembled parties. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Wren versus Wren, he stated. I understand Mrs. Wren is seeking full custody of the minor child and division of certain assets. Is that correct? Lorna's attorney stepped forward. That's correct, Your Honor. Mrs. Wren has been the primary caretaker during Mr. Wren's extended absence. We believe the child's best interests are served by maintaining that stability. Thomas kept his face neutral, but inside, anger flared. The child was sitting right there, hearing himself discussed as if he were a piece of property. Judge Avery turned to Helena. In Mr. Wren's position, Mr. Wren contests both the custody request and the division of his project bonuses, Your Honor. Furthermore, we have evidence that Mrs. Wren has engaged in a pattern of deception that directly bears on these proceedings. The judge raised an eyebrow. What kind of evidence? Helena glanced at Thomas, who nodded slightly. Audio recordings, Your Honor, made by the minor child, documenting conversations between Mrs. Wren and her paramour, as well as Mrs. Wren and her friend discussing their strategy to mislead this court. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Lorna's face drained of color. That's a lie, she snapped. Kellen would never. Mrs. Wren, Judge Avery interrupted. You'll have your opportunity to respond. For now, I'd like to hear from the child in question. He turned to Kellen. Young man, do you have a preference regarding which parent you wish to live with? Kellen stood, his shoulders straight despite the tension visible in his face. I do, Your Honor. I want to live with my dad. And why is that? Kellen glanced at Lorna, then back at the judge. May I play a recording from last night? The courtroom fell silent. Judge Avery studied Kellen for a long moment, then nodded. You may. Kellen pulled out the old smartphone. Thomas watched his son's hands steady, methodical as they navigated to the recording. So young to be doing this. So brave. Kellen pressed play, and Lorna's voice filled the courtroom. Don't worry about old Nolan Avery. He's handled dozens of my studio clients' divorces. Practically senile at this point, signs whatever's put in front of him. Jessa's voice. And if he asks Kellen directly, please. That kid barely speaks above a whisper. Besides, he knows which side his bread is buttered on. When I'm done, I'll have the house, half of Thomas's bonus money, and child support out of the Iceberg Man until Kellen's 18. A male voice unfamiliar, presumably Milo. What about Thomas? Guy was military, right? Might not go down easy. Lorna's laugh. Thomas? He's a robot. All systems and logic. He'll analyze the situation, realize he's outmatched, and retreat to lick his wounds. That's what he does. plans, and calculates while the rest of us actually live. The recording ended. Silence hung heavy in the courtroom. Judge Avery's face had hardened to granite. "Mrs. Wren," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "would you care to explain that recording?" Lorna stood, her face a mask of outrage. "That's obviously edited. Manipulated. My son wouldn't." She turned to Kellen. Tell them you made this up." Kellen looked at his mother steadily. "I didn't make anything up. It's all there. Every word. You little." Lorna cut herself off, visibly struggling for control. "Your Honor, I don't know what my husband has promised my son, but this is clearly a setup. That recording could be anyone. It could be actors, for all we know. We have dozens more," Thomas said quietly, all authenticated by a forensic audio specialist. Date and time stamped. Judge Avery studied the parties before him, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed. "This is highly irregular. I'm calling a recess while I review these materials." He pointed to Helena. "I want all recordings and their authentication documents in my chambers in 15 minutes. He turned to Lorna and her attorney. "You'll have an opportunity to respond after I've reviewed the evidence." The gavel came down. As the parties began to disperse, Thomas placed a hand on Kellen's shoulder. "You did good," he said quietly. Kellen nodded, his face pale but determined. "I told the truth. That's what you always taught me to do." The courthouse hallway buzzed with tension. Thomas stood with Kellen and Rian near a window, giving his son space from Lorna, who paced at the far end with Jessa and her attorney. "What happens now?" Kellen asked, his voice low. "Judge Avery reviews the recordings," Rian explained. "Then he'll decide how to proceed, given what he's already heard." She shrugged. "It doesn't look good for your mom." Thomas watched Lorna across the hallway. Her face was tight with anger as she gestured sharply at her attorney. A tall, athletic man approached them, dark-haired, expensively dressed, with the confident swagger of someone used to commanding attention. Milo Rourke. Thomas's jaw tightened. So, he'd finally get to see the man who'd helped tear apart his family. Kellen tensed beside him. "Dad, that's him. That's Milo." "I figured." Thomas kept his voice neutral despite the anger burning in his chest. Lorna caught sight of Milo and hurried over to him. Even from across the hallway, Thomas could see her agitation, the sharp gestures, the intense conversation. Milo placed a hand on her shoulder, his posture protective. "They look worried," Rian observed with grim satisfaction. "As they should be." The bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. "Judge Avery will see all parties now." Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Judge Avery sat straighter, his expression stern as he surveyed the courtroom. "I've reviewed the initial recordings," he stated without preamble, "and I have serious concerns about the conduct displayed therein." He looked directly at Lorna. "Mrs. Wren, these recordings suggest not only infidelity, which, while unfortunate, is not my primary concern, but a deliberate attempt to mislead this court for financial gain." Lorna's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we contest the authenticity of these recordings. They could easily be manipulated or taken out of context. I've had them preliminarily analyzed by the court's technical staff. The timestamps and metadata appear genuine." Judge Avery tapped his pen against the bench. "But more concerning to me is what I heard directly in this courtroom. The minor child provided a recording that appears to show Mrs. Wren disparaging this court and revealing her true intentions regarding custody." He turned to Kellen. "Young man, do you stand by the authenticity of that recording?" Kellen stood, his voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I recorded it last night. My mother and Jessa Mallon were in the kitchen. I was in the hallway. And what prompted you to make these recordings?" "I heard things. Mom talking about Dad, about taking his money, about using me to get custody." Kellen swallowed hard. It didn't seem right. "I wanted the truth to come out." Judge Avery nodded. "I appreciate your honesty." He turned back to the attorneys. "In light of this evidence, I'm revoking Mrs. Wren's emergency custody motion. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into potential fraud and perjury charges related to these proceedings." He looked at Lorna directly. "Mrs. Wren, I take allegations of attempting to mislead this court very seriously. Your apparent plan to use your child as a pawn in a financial scheme is disturbing, to say the least. Lorna stood, her face flushed. Your Honor, this is outrageous. I've been Kellen's primary caregiver for 18 months while my husband was off playing with his government toys. I've built a business, maintain a home. Mrs. Wren. Judge Avery's voice cut through her protests. I'm not interested in your justifications. The evidence suggests you've been planning to defraud both this court and your husband. That's my concern. He turned to Thomas. Mr. Wren, I'm awarding you temporary full custody while this matter is investigated further. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks to review the findings. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Thomas placed a protective arm around Kellen's shoulders as they gathered their things. Let's go, he said quietly. They had almost reached the door when Lorna's voice rang out behind them. Kellen, how could you do this to me? Your own mother. Thomas felt Kellen tense beside him, but kept walking. In the hallway, Lorna caught up to them, her face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little spy. After everything I've done for you. Thomas stepped between them. Enough, Lorna. Don't you dare tell me enough. Lorna's voice rose, drawing attention for passers-by. This is between me and my son. Not anymore, Thomas replied evenly. Judge's orders. Milo appeared beside Lorna, his expression stormy. Hey man, back off. She's upset. With good reason, Thomas replied coldly. Fraud doesn't typically go over well in court. You smug bastard, Lorna hissed. You think you've won? This isn't over. For today it is. Thomas turned to Kellen. Let's go. As they walked away, Lorna's voice rose again, directed at Kellen's back. You'll regret this. When all your friends find out what you did to your own mother. Thomas felt Kellen falter beside him. In one fluid motion, he turned back toward Lorna and Milo. Threaten my son again, and the recordings go public, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Every word you've said about the judge, about me, about Kellen. I'm sure your yoga clients would love to hear their spiritual guide plotting fraud and perjury. Lorna blanched. Milo stepped forward, chest puffed. You threatening her, buddy? Thomas assessed the man coldly, gym-built muscles, expensive watch, the swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences. He calculated distance, angle, the most efficient point of contact. Not a threat, a fact. Milo moved, first a telegraph shoulder check that Thomas sidestepped easily. As Milo stumbled forward, Thomas delivered a single, precise punch to the jaw. Not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to make a point. Milo staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Thomas hadn't raised his voice, hadn't shown any emotion at all. Just clinical precision. Lorna lunged forward, palm outstretched. The slap connected with Thomas's cheek, the sound echoing in the hallway. Psychopath, she spat. Thomas didn't flinch. We're done here. He turned to Kellen. Let's go. As they walked away, Thomas became aware of phones pointed in their direction. The confrontation had been recorded. Part of him, the strategic part, knew this was bad. But the father in him, the part that had seen Kellen's face when Lorna threatened him, couldn't bring himself to care. The cabin sat nestled among pine trees, its weathered exterior blending with the surrounding forest. Thomas cut the engine and sat for a moment, letting the silence settle around them. Beside him, Kellen stared out the window, his expression unreadable. The events at the courthouse had left both of them drained. Home for now, Thomas said quietly. Kellen nodded. It looks peaceful. They grabbed their bags from the trunk and approached the cabin. As Thomas had expected, the key was hidden in a false rock by the porch steps. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable open living area with a stone fireplace, small kitchen, 2 bedrooms off a short hallway. Tilda left a note, Kellen said, picking up a piece of paper from the kitchen counter. Says there's food in the fridge and to call her when we're settled. Thomas nodded, setting down their bags. Pick whichever bedroom you want. While Kellen explored, Thomas's phone buzzed with a message from Helena Chun. Courthouse video going viral. News outlets calling. Don't respond to anything without consulting me. Thomas sighed. The confrontation with Milo and Lorna, his punch, her slap caught on camera. Just one more complication. Kellen emerged from the smaller bedroom, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I'll take this one. Thomas nodded. Good choice. Best view of the woods. They moved around each other carefully, unpacking essentials, settling into the unfamiliar space. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Kellen spoke. I'm sorry about what happened. At the courthouse. Thomas looked up from where he was arranging his clothes in a drawer. None of that is on you, Kellen. I know, but still. The boy sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't think Mom would react like that. People show their true colors when backed into a corner. Thomas sat beside his son. Your mother made her choices. So did you. So did I. Do you think the judge will still let me stay with you? After what happened with you and Milo? Yes. Thomas kept his voice confident despite his own uncertainty. The recordings are what matter. The truth is what matters. Kellen nodded, not entirely convinced. What happens now? We wait. Let Helena and Rian do their jobs. Focus on getting you settled. Maybe looking at schools out here. Thomas glanced around the cabin. Make this place home for a while. That evening, as Kellen showered, Thomas called Rian for an update. It's bad out there, she said without preamble. The videos everywhere. Military dad decks wife's lover in custody battle. The headlines write themselves. And Lorna, playing the victim. Hard. She's given 2 interviews already, claiming you're unstable, dangerous. Rian's voice hardened. But here's the thing, someone leaked one of the recordings. Thomas straightened. Which one? The one where she's coaching Milo on what to say to make you look bad. Calling you the iceberg man and laughing about how she'll take everything. Rian paused. Public opinion is shifting. The comments on her interviews are not kind. I don't care about public opinion. I care about what the judge thinks. In this case, they might be related. Avery's no fool. He'll see through Lorna's act, especially now that the recordings are out there. Rian sighed. Just lay low for now. Helena's filing motions to protect Kellen from having to testify further. Given the recordings, we might not need it. Thank you, Thomas said. For everything. That's what family's for. Rian paused. How's Kellen holding up? Thomas glanced toward the bathroom, where he could hear the shower running. Better than he should have to. Kid's strong. Wonder where he gets that from. After ending the call, Thomas sat on the porch, watching darkness settle over the forest. His mind worked methodically through the events of the day, analyzing, planning, preparing for what came next. The door opened behind him. Kellen stepped out, his hair damp from the shower. Mind if I join you? The boy asked. Thomas shifted over on the porch swing. Not at all. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets, the rustle of leaves, an owl somewhere in the distance. Dad, Kellen's voice was hesitant. Can I ask you something? Anything. Did you know? About Mom? Before you came home. Thomas considered the question carefully. I suspected something was wrong. The separate bedroom, the way she avoided video calls. He shook his head. But no, I didn't know for sure. Kellen nodded, processing this. I didn't know for sure at first either. Just noticed things. The way she changed how she dressed. Phone calls she'd take outside. Coming home late. When did you know for certain? January. Kellen's voice was flat. I saw texts on her phone when she left it unlocked. From Milo. They weren't subtle. Thomas felt a surge of anger at the thought of his 15-year-old son having to process such a discovery alone. I'm sorry you had to deal with that by yourself. I didn't know if I was supposed to be loyal to her. Kellen's voice cracked slightly. But I knew I couldn't lie to you. Thomas nodded, cold but proud. You did what I raised you to do. Kellen leaned slightly against his father's shoulder. Thanks, Dad. Thomas placed an arm around his son's shoulders, holding him close as darkness settled completely around the cabin. Together, they watched the stars emerge, 2 solitary figures in a world that had shifted beneath their feet. 2 weeks passed in the quiet of the cabin. Thomas and Kellen settled into a routine breakfast together. Online schoolwork for Kellen, job applications, and legal preparations for Thomas. In the afternoons, they explored the surrounding woods or worked on minor repairs around the cabin. The isolation brought a peace that both needed. Away from the media attention, from Lorna's accusations, from the whispers and stares, they found a rhythm that felt like healing. On the Wednesday, before their scheduled court date, Helena Chun arrived at the cabin, her compact car kicking up dust on the gravel drive. You're a hard man to find, Thomas Wren, she said as she stepped onto the porch, briefcase in hand. That's by design. Thomas ushered her inside. Coffee, please. Kellen emerged from his room, laptop in hand. Ms. Chun, is everything okay? Helena's professional demeanor softened slightly. Everything's proceeding as planned, but there have been some developments we need to discuss. Over coffee at the small kitchen table, Helena laid out a series of documents. Lorna's attorney has filed a motion to exclude the recordings on privacy grounds, she began. Standard tactic expected. What they didn't expect was this. She slid a document across the table. Thomas scanned it, his expression unchanging despite the surge of satisfaction he felt. What is it? Kellen asked. The forensic tech specialists found metadata in some of your mother's exhibits. Medical records, she submitted, supposedly showing your father had been treated for anger management issues. Helena turned to Thomas. Records that appear to have been digitally altered. Thomas nodded, unsurprised. Forged? Completely. Helena's smile was sharp. The metadata shows editing timestamps, user information, the works. She might as well have signed her name to the forgery. So what happens now? Kellen asked. Judge Avery has called an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. He's not pleased, to put it mildly. Helena gathered the papers. This shifts everything in our favor. Dramatically. Thomas nodded, the analytical part of his mind already calculating the implications. What do you need from us? Both of you there, on time, looking respectable. Helena glanced at Kellen. No more recordings needed. The ones we have, plus this forgery evidence, are more than enough. After Helena left, Thomas and Kellen sat at the table, the weight of tomorrow's hearing hanging between them. Dad, Kellen's voice was hesitant. What happens if we win? With Mom, I mean. Thomas considered his son's question carefully. Legally, she'll likely lose any claim to custody. There may be financial penalties, possibly even criminal charges for the forgery. That's not what I meant. Kellen fidgeted with a napkin. I meant, what happens with us and her? Do I still have to see her? Thomas studied his son's face, the tension around his eyes, the careful blankness that reminded Thomas painfully of himself. He taught Kellen too well how to hide his emotions. That depends partly on the court, partly on you. Thomas chose his words with care. If you want contact with her, we'll make that happen, regardless of what I feel about her. Kellen was quiet for a long moment. I don't know what I want. Right now, I'm just angry at her for what she did to you, to us. That's fair, Thomas said. You don't have to decide anything now. What about you? Kellen asked. Will you ever forgive her? Thomas thought of the recordings, Lorna's casual cruelty, her manipulation, her attempts to use their son as a pawn. He thought of the forged medical records that could have destroyed his reputation, his career prospects, his relationship with Kellen. No, he said simply. Some actions cross lines that can't be uncrossed. Kellen nodded, seeming to understand. Like you always say, you don't rescue people who set fire to your house. Exactly. The next morning, they drove to the courthouse in silence, each lost in his own thoughts. The media presence had diminished somewhat, but several reporters still waited near the entrance, cameras ready. Thomas guided Kellen through them with a protective arm, ignoring the shouted questions. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Lorna sat with her attorney, her face pale but composed. She wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, the picture of respectability. When she saw Kellen, something flickered across her face, longing, regret, anger. It was gone too quickly for Thomas to identify. Judge Avery entered, his expression stern. The courtroom fell silent. I've called this emergency hearing to address some deeply troubling issues that have arisen in this case. He began without preamble. Specifically, evidence has come to light suggesting that Mrs. Wren submitted falsified medical records to this court. Lorna's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client maintains these records are authentic. The forensic analysis suggests otherwise, Counselor. Judge Avery held up a report. According to our technical experts, these documents were altered 2 weeks ago. The original records, which we've obtained directly from the provider, show no such diagnosis or treatment. He turned to Lorna. Mrs. Wren, Attempting to mislead this court is a serious offense. Combined with the audio evidence previously submitted, it paints a disturbing picture of your conduct in these proceedings. Lorna stood, her composure cracking. Your Honor, I'm being set up. My husband, my son, they're working together against me. These recordings, this supposed forgery, it's all part of a campaign to destroy me. Mrs. Wren, Judge Avery's voice sharpened. Control yourself, or I will have you removed. Lorna sat, visibly struggling for control. Judge Avery continued. In light of this new evidence, I am revoking Mrs. Wren's custody petition entirely. Furthermore, I am referring the matter of the falsified documents to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. He turned to Thomas. Mr. Wren, I am granting you sole legal and physical custody of the minor child, Kellen Wren, effective immediately. Mrs. Wren will be permitted supervised visitation only, pending a full investigation of these matters. The gavel came down. This court is adjourned until next month, when we will address the division of assets. Thomas felt Kellen's hand grip his arm. The boy's face showed a complex mix of emotions: relief, sadness, vindication. It's over, Kellen whispered. This part is, Thomas replied quietly. We've won the first battle. As they gathered their things, Lorna approached, her attorney attempting to hold her back. This isn't over, she hissed, low enough that only Thomas and Kellen could hear. You've ruined my life, my reputation. My business is tanking because of that video, those recordings. You did that yourself, Thomas replied evenly. Every choice was yours. Kellen. Lorna turned to her son, her voice softening. Honey, please. You don't understand what was happening. Your father was gone so long. I was lonely. I made mistakes. Stop. Kellen's voice was quiet but firm. Just stop lying. Even now, you're still lying. Lorna reached for him, but Kellen stepped back. I heard everything, Mom. On those recordings. How you talked about me. About Dad. About using me to get money. Tears filled Lorna's eyes, whether genuine or calculated. Thomas couldn't tell. Kellen, please. I'm your mother. I love you. Kellen looked at her for a long moment. Maybe you do, in your way, but that doesn't make what you did okay. He turned away, heading toward the courthouse exit. Thomas followed, leaving Lorna standing alone in the emptying courtroom. Outside, Rian waited by Thomas's car, her face breaking into a rare smile when she saw them. I heard, she said. Congratulations. Thomas nodded, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. Thank you. For everything. What's next? Rian asked. Thomas glanced at Kellen, who was already climbing into the passenger seat, clearly eager to leave. Home. Whatever that looks like now. The river flowed quietly beside them, sunlight dancing on its surface. Thomas and Kellen sat on large rocks near the shore, fishing poles propped beside them, and used. They'd come ostensibly to fish, but both knew it was really about the silence, the space, the chance to breathe away from everything else that a week had passed since the hearing. They'd remained at the cabin, making plans, looking at houses outside Portland, researching schools for Kellen. The media interest had faded somewhat, though Thomas still received occasional calls from reporters seeking comment on what they dubbed the recording divorce. Dad, Kellen broke the comfortable silence between them. Can I tell you something? Thomas turned to his son. Always. Kellen picked up a small stone, turning it over in his hands. I knew about the affair for months, before I started recording. Thomas nodded, waiting for Kellen to continue. I saw them together back in December, at that new coffee place downtown. Kellen threw the stone into the river, watching the ripples spread. Mom didn't see me. I was supposed to be at soccer practice, but it got canceled because of the rain. Why didn't you say anything? Thomas asked gently. I didn't know what to do. Kellen's voice tightened. You were in Alaska. I couldn't just call and say, hey, Dad, Mom's cheating. And part of me thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some explanation, but there wasn't. No. Kellen picked up another stone. Then I overheard her talking to Jessa about the custody thing, about taking your money. That's when I started recording. He looked up at Thomas. I didn't know if I was supposed to be loyal to her, but I knew I couldn't lie to you. Thomas studied his son, this boy who'd carried such a burden alone, who'd been forced to make an impossible choice between his parents. Pride swelled in his chest, alongside a deep sadness that Kellen had been put in that position at all. "You did what I raised you to do," Thomas said, his voice gentle despite the cold certainty behind the words. "Was it wrong?" Kellen asked quietly. Recording her like that, Thomas considered the question carefully. In most circumstances, secretly recording someone would be wrong, yes. But when someone is planning to hurt others, to commit fraud, to lie to the courts, sometimes the only way to protect yourself and others is to ensure the truth comes out. Kellen nodded, seeming to accept this. "I miss who I thought she was. If that makes sense. The mom who made pancakes on Saturdays and came to my games." He threw another stone into the river. "But I don't think that person was ever real." "People are complex," Thomas said. "Your mother loves you in her way, but she also made choices that hurt you deeply. Both those things can be true at the same time. Do you think she'll change? Try to make things right." Thomas thought of Lorna's reaction in court, the blame, the denial, the refusal to acknowledge her own actions. "I don't know. People can change, but they rarely do unless they recognize the need to." They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the river flow past. Thomas felt Kellen shifting beside him, working up to something else. "Dad, what's going to happen with us now? Where are we going to live? I've been looking at houses. There's one near Forest Heights I think you might like. Good school district. Not too far from your friends, but far enough from." Thomas trailed off. "From Mom," Kellen finished. "It's okay. You can say it." Thomas nodded. "From your mother, yes. Will I have to see her? For visitation and stuff?" "Eventually, yes. The judge ordered supervised visits for now, but that will be revisited in a few months." Thomas looked at his son. "How do you feel about that?" Kellen shrugged. "I don't know. Part of me doesn't want to see her at all. Part of me still misses her, I guess. Is that dumb?" "No." Thomas placed a hand on Kellen's shoulder. "It's normal. She's your mother. That connection doesn't just disappear, even when she's hurt you. But you don't feel that way about her. My relationship with her is different from yours," Thomas said carefully. "And it's okay for us to feel differently about this. You're never going to forgive her, are you?" It wasn't really a question. Thomas thought about it honestly. "No. Some betrayals run too deep." Kellen nodded, seemingly satisfied with the honesty, if not the answer itself. "Thanks for not lying to me, for treating me like I can handle the truth. You've proven you can handle much more than most adults," Thomas replied. "I'll always be straight with you, Kellen. That's a promise." They gathered there and used fishing gear as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the river. As they walked back toward the car, Kellen matched his steps to his father's steady, methodical, moving forward together. The weeks that followed brought a steady stream of developments, each one shifting the landscape of their new reality. Jessa Mallon was investigated for her role in helping Lorna forge documents. Text messages recovered from Lorna's phone showed Jessa advising her on how to alter the medical records, even suggesting a contact who could make the changes look professional. She faced potential accessory charges, her carefully cultivated image crumbling under scrutiny. Milo Rourke dumped Lorna within days of the courthouse video going viral. His gym business began losing clients as the recordings circulated, patrons uncomfortable with his role in the affair and a subsequent custody battle. He gave an interview to a local lifestyle blog, claiming he'd been misled about Lorna's marriage situation, a transparent attempt at damage control that fooled few. Lorna herself tried desperately to spin her side of the story. She posted a tearful video on her yoga studio's social media accounts, painting herself as a neglected wife who'd made a mistake and was now being punished disproportionately. "All I want is to see my son," she claimed, dabbing at artfully applied tears. But the public had heard the recordings. They'd seen the courtroom video. They knew about the forged documents. The narrative had solidified against her. Thomas watched these developments with detached interest, tracking them the way he'd track weather patterns or market fluctuations noteworthy, but ultimately external to his core focus: rebuilding a stable life for Kellen. They found a house in Forest Heights Modern, with clean lines and large windows overlooking the woods. 3 bedrooms, a dedicated office space for Thomas, a finished basement perfect for Kellen's gaming setup. Far enough from their old neighborhood to provide a fresh start, close enough to maintain Kellen's school connections. Thomas accepted a position with Barrett Engineering, working on renewable energy systems, a natural extension of his classified Alaska project, now that certain aspects had been declassified. The work was engaging, the colleagues competent, the schedule flexible enough to accommodate Kellen's needs. Life was reforming around them, pieces shifting into new configurations. One evening, as Thomas reviewed house inspection documents at the cabin's kitchen table, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a long message from Lorna. "Thomas, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but we need to talk. For Kellen's sake, this situation has gotten out of hand. I made mistakes, yes, but the punishment doesn't fit the crime. My business is failing. My reputation is destroyed. I can't even see my own son without a court monitor present. Can we please meet? Talk this through like adults? Find some middle ground? For Kellen." Thomas read the message twice, analyzing it word by word. No admission of wrongdoing. No real apology. Just mistakes and complaints about consequences. The focus on her loss as business, reputation before mentioning Kellen. The attempt to use their son as leverage. Nothing had changed. Not really. Thomas blocked the number, then forwarded the message to Helena Chun. One more piece of evidence for the ongoing proceedings. Later that night, Kellen knocked on his bedroom door. "Dad, you busy?" Thomas set aside his laptop. "Never too busy for you." "What's up?" Kellen held up his phone. "Mom texted me. Wants to meet for lunch tomorrow. Says there's a supervisor already arranged." Thomas nodded. "That's her right under the court order. Do you want to go?" Kellen sat on the edge of Thomas's bed, fidgeting with his phone case. "I don't know. Part of me wants to see her. Part of me is still so angry." "Both valid," Thomas said. "You don't have to decide right now. And whatever you decide is fine by me." "She also—" Kellen hesitated. "She asked me to talk to you. About working things out. Said you weren't responding to her messages. I got a message from her earlier. I blocked the number." Thomas kept his voice neutral. "What she's asking isn't something I'm willing to discuss." "So you're never going to talk to her again?" Kellen asked. "Even about me? Helena will handle any necessary communications about custody arrangements." Thomas studied his son's face. "Does that bother you?" Kellen thought about it. "No, not really. It's just strange to think about you two never speaking again. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned," Thomas said. "You don't rescue people who set fire to your house." Kellen nodded slowly, absorbing this. I think I will meet her tomorrow. Just to see." "I'll drive you," Thomas offered. "Wait nearby." The next day, Thomas watched from a cafe across the street as Kellen met Lorna at a small restaurant downtown. A court-appointed supervisor sat at a nearby table, maintaining a discreet but watchful presence. Even from a distance, Thomas could read the dynamic. Lorna leaning forward intently, gesturing with her hands. Kellen sitting straight, his posture a mirror of Thomas's own controlled, contained. He was listening but not engaging fully, maintaining boundaries even as Lorna tried to breach them. After exactly 1 hour, the time allocated by the court, Kellen stood. Thomas watched as Lorna reached for his hand. Kellen allowed the brief contact, but didn't initiate a hug. Then he walked out, leaving Lorna at the table, the supervisor following at a distance. That in the car, Kellen was quiet, staring out the window as Portland passed by. "How was it?" Thomas finally asked. "Weird." Kellen kept his gaze on the passing scenery. "She kept saying how much she missed me, how this was all a big misunderstanding." "And what did you say?" "Not much." Kellen shrugged. Told her about the new house. About soccer tryouts at the new school. Normal stuff. Thomas nodded, not pushing. "She asked about you," Kellen continued. "If you were seeing anyone. If you talked about her." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you don't talk about her much. That you're focused on work and getting us settled." Kellen turned to look at Thomas. "Was that okay?" "Of course. I'll never ask you to lie, Kellen. Not even about this." Kellen nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I think I'll go again next week. It's only an hour." He paused. "Is that okay with you?" "If that's what you want, yes." "Thanks, Dad." Kellen turned back to the window. "For letting me figure this out my own way." Thomas glanced at his son's profile, so young still, but with an old soul shining through his eyes. Always. The final court hearing regarding asset division took place on a crisp autumn morning. Thomas dressed with his usual precision navy suit, white shirt, conservative tie. Professional. Controlled. Helena Chin met him at the courthouse steps. Ready for this? Thomas nodded. Just want it finished. It will be today. Helena checked her watch. Judge Avery's been clear about his views on this case. The forged documents were the final nail in the coffin. Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty, just the attorneys, Thomas, Lorna, and a court reporter. The media had largely moved on to fresher scandals, the public's attention span exhausted. Lorna sat with her new attorney, a young woman with sharp eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She ditched the polished yoga instructor look for something more subdued, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, simple blouse and skirt, playing the repentant wife. Too little, too late. Thomas kept his face neutral when their eyes met briefly across the room. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing she could use. Judge Avery entered, and the proceedings began. The division of assets was straightforward. The house would be sold. The proceeds split according to the prenuptial agreement Thomas had insisted upon before their marriage, a safeguard from his military days that had proven prescient. Thomas's project bonuses remained his own, protected by contract language and security clearance requirements. Lorna was ordered to pay fines for the document forgery, plus Thomas's legal fees. The supervised visitation with Kellen would continue for 6 months, after which the arrangement would be revisited. You try to weaponize the court against a man who gave his life to service and family. Judge Avery concluded, his voice heavy with disapproval. This court does not reward liars. The gavel came down for the final time. Just like that, 15 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. Outside the courtroom, Thomas shook Helena's hand. Thank you for everything. Just doing my job, she replied with a small smile. Good luck, Mr. Wren. As Thomas headed toward the exit, Lorna caught up to him in the hallway. Thomas, wait. She reached for his arm, but stopped short of touching him. Please, can we talk? Thomas paused, turning to face her. In her eyes, he saw desperation, her perfect life in shambles, her reputation in tatters, her financial security threatened. For a moment, he felt a flicker of their shared history, the young woman he'd fallen in love with, the mother of his child, the partner of 15 years. The moment passed. We have nothing to discuss, Lorna. Everything's been settled by the court. Not everything, she insisted. What about moving forward? Co-parenting? Kellen needs both of us. Kellen has both of us, Thomas replied evenly. Just not together. That was your choice. My choice. Lorna's voice sharpened. You were gone for 18 months, Thomas. You left us. I was working, supporting our family, with your full knowledge and agreement. Thomas kept his voice level. You were sleeping with Milo, forging documents, and planning to take my son and my money. Those aren't comparable actions. I made a mistake, Lorna said, her voice dropping to a whisper. A terrible mistake. But 15 years of marriage, doesn't that count for anything? Don't we owe it to Kellen to at least be civil? We'll be civil in court and at custody exchanges, Thomas replied. Anything beyond that isn't necessary. So that's it. 15 years erased. Not erased. Ended. Thomas looked at her directly. You did that. Not me. Lorna's face hardened. You're a cold bastard, Thomas. You always have been. That's why I. Goodbye, Lorna. Thomas turned and walked away, her words fading behind him. Outside, rain fell in a gentle mist, typical Portland weather. Thomas walked to his car, feeling lighter with each step. Not happy exactly, but free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from the slow erosion of trust that had been happening long before he left for Alaska. That evening, Thomas and Kellen ate dinner at the cabin their last night there before moving into the new house the following day. Chinese takeout, Kellen's choice, spread across the small kitchen table. So it's done, Kellen asked, poking at his sweet and sour chicken. The divorce is final. Thomas nodded. All official. Assets divided, custody arranged. Mom called me, Kellen said, crying. Said she tried to talk to you. She did try. And? Thomas met his son's gaze directly. And I said no. Kellen considered this, his expression thoughtful. She told me you were being stubborn, that you wouldn't give her a chance to explain. There's nothing to explain, Thomas replied. Her actions spoke for themselves. Yeah. Kellen pushed rice around his plate. She also said to tell you she's sorry, that she knows she messed up, but she wants to make it right. Do you believe her? Thomas asked. Kellen thought about it. I don't know. Part of me wants to. But then I remember the recordings, the things she said. He shook his head. It's hard to trust anything she says now. Trust is earned, Thomas said. Not given blindly. Not even to family. I know. Kellen looked up. What if she really has changed, though? What if she means it? Thomas considered his answer carefully. People can change. But real change takes time, self-reflection, and consistent action. It doesn't happen overnight because consequences finally catch up. So you'll never forgive her? Not ever. Some actions have permanent consequences, Kellen. Some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. Thomas's voice softened. That doesn't mean you have to feel the same way. Your relationship with your mother is yours to define. Kellen nodded slowly, processing this. You don't rescue people who set fire to your house. He repeated Thomas's words from earlier. No, Thomas agreed. You don't. The modern house stood on a wooded lot at the edge of Forest Heights, its large windows reflecting the autumn sunlight. Inside, the space was clean, orderly, but lived-in family photos on the walls, soccer trophies on shelves, books and magazines stacked on the coffee table. Thomas sat at the kitchen island, reviewing plans for a new wind turbine design. After a year at Bear Engineering, he'd been promoted to lead engineer on their renewable energy division, work that challenged him, colleagues who respected him, hours that allowed him to be home when Kellen returned from school. The front door opened, and voices filtered in Kellen's deeper now at 16 and Rian's sharp tones, followed by Tilda's gruff laugh. Dad, we're back, Kellen called, dropping his backpack by the door. Thomas looked up, nodding to Rian and Tilda as they entered the kitchen. How'd it go? The kid nailed it, Tilda announced, helping herself to coffee from the pot Thomas had prepared. Scholarship committee was impressed. Principal practically guaranteed they'll accept him. Kellen grinned. It was pretty cool. They really liked my coding project, the one about traffic flow optimization. And when I mentioned your work on the Alaska project, the science director got all excited. Good job, Thomas said, pride evident in his voice. The Westridge Academy would be lucky to have you. If he gets that scholarship, he's set for college too, Rian added, accepting the coffee mug Tilda handed her. They have that direct pipeline to MIT. Thomas watched as Kellen moved around the kitchen, grabbing snacks, talking animatedly about the interview. His son had thrived over the past year, excelling in school, making the varsity soccer team, developing his coding skills to an impressive level. The shadows that had haunted him during the divorce had largely faded. Life had settled into a new pattern, different but solid. Rian visited often, the old rift between her and Thomas healed by shared purpose and renewed family bonds. Tilda helped Kellen with college preparation, her practical wisdom as valuable now as it had been when Thomas was a teenager in her care. Lorna remained on the periphery. The supervised visits had transitioned to standard visitation days every other weekend, some holidays. Kellen maintained a relationship with her, cautious but real. Thomas handled the exchanges with professional courtesy, nothing more. They spoke only when absolutely necessary, about logistics, schedules, Kellen's needs. No more, no less. There had been attempts at reconciliation on her part, tearful phone calls, handwritten letters, appeals through mutual friends. Thomas had responded to each the same way, silence. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. Some fires burned too hot, left nothing but ash in their wake. Earth to Thomas. Rian waved a hand in front of his face. You in there? Thomas blinked, focusing on his sister. Sorry. Thinking. Clearly. Rian rolled her eyes. Tilda asked if you're still planning the Alaska trip for spring break. Yes. Thomas nodded. Flights are booked. Just waiting on the cabin confirmation. Kid's never going to see a moose, Tilda predicted. Too much noise, those big feet of his. Well, too, Kellen protested. Dad's going to show me all the best spots, right? Right. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. The same places our dad used to take us camping before, before the fire that had claimed their parents' lives, before the foster system, before Tilda had taken in two traumatized children and given them structure, purpose, a chance that Rian's expression softened. "He'd be proud of you. Both of you," she added, glancing at Kellen. "Speaking of proud," Tilda interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional turn. "Show your dad that letter, boy." Kellen pulled an envelope from his backpack, sliding it across the counter to Thomas. "Got this today, from a state science competition." Thomas opened it, scanning the contents. "First place, regional finals next month." He looked up at his son. "Impressive work." Kellen shrugged, but couldn't hide his pleased smile. "The algorithm's still not perfect, but it's getting there." As Tilda and Rian badgered Kellen for details about the competition, Thomas watched his son explain his project, hands moving animatedly, eyes bright with enthusiasm. The analytical mind Thomas had recognized and nurtured from Kellen's earliest years had developed into something remarkable, methodical yet creative, precise yet innovative. Truth had outlived image. Loyalty had been earned, not bought. And revenge? It hadn't required rage. Just precision. Just truth methodically applied. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still difficult moments, Kellen's occasional struggles with divided loyalty, the logistics of co-parenting with someone Thomas refused to engage with directly, the lingering media interest that flared up occasionally when someone recognized them from that recording case. But they were rebuilding, together, on solid foundations this time, anchored in truth and trust. And that, Thomas reflected as he joined his family at the kitchen table, was victory enough.